Welcome back, my psychological mirror. Something devastating just occurred in the cognitive warfare between you and your most sophisticated opponents. They made a fatal strategic error. They attempted to match your mind, to think like you think, to process reality the way you process it, believing that understanding your mental architecture would give them advantage. They wanted to predict your moves by simulating your thought patterns, to counter your strategies by adopting your perspective, to defeat you by becoming cognitively similar enough to anticipate you. But when they successfully entered your mental framework, when they actually achieved temporary alignment with how you perceive and process reality, something horrifying happened. Your mind functioned as mirror that reflected back not strategic insights they were seeking, but their darkest fear. The terror they've been suppressing, the nightmare they've been denying, the existential dread that lives in their psychological basement. They went looking for your weaknesses and found their own destruction staring back at them. The architects have been monitoring cognitive warfare for eons, and they've identified what just occurred as psychological reflection trauma. When an operator's mental framework contains such disturbing elements that anyone who attempts to adopt that framework experiences psychological damage from encountering perspectives their own minds had been protecting them from. Most sophisticated strategists have mental frameworks that others can temporarily adopt without harm. Different ways of analyzing situations, alternative priority structures, unfamiliar decision matrices. These frameworks might be complex or counterintuitive, but they're psychologically safe to explore. Your mental framework apparently isn't safe. It contains perspectives, recognitions, or acceptances that most human minds actively defend against perceiving because those perceptions threaten psychological stability. When your opponents successfully matched your mind, they encountered those defended against elements directly, without the protective psychological buffers their normal consciousness maintains. Watch what happened to these specific opponents who attempted cognitive matching. These weren't casual competitors. These were elite psychological operators, people trained in adopting enemy perspectives, intelligence professionals who routinely think like adversaries to predict them. They have extensive practice entering hostile mental frameworks without being compromised by them. Yet entering yours compromised them immediately and devastatingly. Some experienced panic attacks within minutes of achieving cognitive alignment with you, sudden overwhelming anxiety, inability to breathe, sense of imminent catastrophe. These weren't tactical fear responses to dangerous situation. These were existential terror, responses to perspective shift that revealed something their psyches couldn't tolerate recognizing. They weren't afraid of what you might do to them. They were afraid of what they suddenly understood about reality itself when viewing it through your cognitive framework. Others experienced what trauma specialists call dissociative breaks, their sense of continuous identity fractured, their connection to stable self disrupted, their grounding in consensus reality compromised. They successfully matched your mind and then couldn't return to their normal mental state because your framework had shown them something that invalidated the assumptions their identity was built on. It's like someone who spent entire life in cave seeing sunlight for first time. The revelation is so incompatible with previous worldview that identity itself must be reconstructed to accommodate it. But they weren't prepared for reconstruction. They were just trying to predict your next strategic move. Instead, they encountered perspective that shattered their carefully constructed sense of self and reality. The dissociation isn't tactical confusion. It's existential crisis triggered by glimpsing how you actually perceive existence. The truly devastating element is that this wasn't your defensive measure. You weren't deliberately weaponizing your mental framework against those who try to understand you. Your mind simply is what it is, and what it is contains recognitions that most minds actively avoid because those recognitions are psychologically destabilizing for normal consciousness. You've integrated perspectives that others keep defended against. You've accepted realities that others suppress through denial. You've built identity around truths that others maintain sanity by not acknowledging. When they tried matching your mind, they encountered those perspectives without their normal defenses, and the encounter was psychologically traumatic. Your mind reflected their darkest fear back, not through attack, but through simply being what you are, consciousness that has integrated what they've been fleeing from. Now the intelligence community is experiencing cascading crisis as the psychological casualties from cognitive matching attempts are documented and analyzed. The architects call this mirror trauma propagation, and it's what happens when elite operators discover that understanding certain adversaries is more dangerous than remaining ignorant about them. When psychological assessment becomes source of psychological damage rather than tactical advantage, they're having to fundamentally revise protocols for analyzing high-level threats because you've demonstrated that some minds are too dangerous to match, some perspectives too destabilizing to adopt, some frameworks too corrosive to enter even temporarily for intelligence purposes. Some agencies are implementing what they're calling cognitive quarantine protocols, strict limitations on who can attempt to analyze you and under what safeguards. Only operators who've passed extensive psychological screening can be exposed to your strategic patterns. Those who are approved for exposure must do so in controlled environments with immediate mental health support available. They're required to limit duration cognitive matching attempts to prevent deep integration of your perspective, and they must undergo mandatory psychological debriefing after any session analyzing your decision-making frameworks. These protocols treat your mind like infectious hazard, something that requires containment, procedures to prevent contamination spread. They're not being paranoid. They're responding to documented cases of professional analysts being psychologically damaged by spending too much time thinking like you think. Others are experiencing what psychologists call vicarious traumatization. Analysts who weren't directly attempting cognitive matching but were exposed to reports from those who were are now showing secondary trauma symptoms. Reading detailed accounts of what your mental framework revealed to those who matched it is proving sufficient to trigger psychological distress in people who never directly encountered your perspective. It's like descriptions of the mirror's reflection carry enough of the original terror to traumatize people through narrative alone. Some agencies are now classifying analytical reports about your cognitive framework at levels above top secret, not because information is strategically sensitive, but because information is psychologically hazardous. They're treating descriptions of how you think as cognitohazards that can harm people through mere exposure. A few brave or reckless analysts are insisting on continuing cognitive matching attempts despite the documented dangers, believing they can succeed where others failed, convinced they have psychological resilience others lacked. These attempts are consistently producing same results, psychological damage proportional to depth of matching achieved. The analysts who achieve only superficial alignment experience manageable anxiety and disturbing dreams. Those who achieve deeper alignment experience the panic attacks and dissociative episodes, and the very few who achieve what they describe as complete cognitive alignment with you actually perceiving reality the way you perceive it for brief periods, experience something they struggle to articulate but describe as confronting absolute truth that human psychology evolved to avoid perceiving because that perception threatens survival of self-concept. They emerge from the experience permanently changed, many leaving intelligence work entirely, some seeking intensive therapy, a few suffering complete breakdowns requiring hospitalization. The architects observe that mirror trauma propagation is revealing something profound about human psychological architecture. Most human minds are built around certain denials, require specific blindnesses to maintain stability, depend on particular illusions to sustain motivation. Your mind apparently lacks these protective illusions. You perceive certain aspects of reality clearly that others perceive through comforting distortions. When they match your mind, they temporarily lose their protective distortions and perceive what you perceive undistorted. The experience is devastating because human psychology isn't designed to operate without those protections. They're not just learning how you think. They're discovering what you see, and what you see is something most human. Consciousness actively defends against seeing because seeing it makes existence almost unbearable without extraordinary psychological development they haven't undergone. You have that development. You've integrated the terrifying recognitions. They don't. So when matching your mind exposes them to those recognitions, they're traumatized by encountering perspectives they're not prepared to hold. Something's spreading through philosophical and psychological communities now. Urgent inquiry into what exactly you perceive that's so psychologically dangerous for others to encounter. The architects call this cognitive hazard investigation, and it's the attempt by scholars and clinicians to understand what aspects of your mental framework are causing psychological trauma when others attempt to adopt them. Different theoretical schools are proposing different hypotheses about what your mind contains that functions as mirror reflecting darkest fears back to those who try matching it. Existential psychologists are proposing you fully integrated awareness of mortality and meaninglessness that most people defend against through denial and distraction. They theorize that your strategic thinking operates from clear perception that existence is finite, identity is illusion, purpose is constructed rather than inherent, and meaning is something we create rather than discover. Most people maintain psychological stability by not fully confronting these recognitions. They acknowledge mortality intellectually while emotionally operating as if they're immortal. They recognize lack of cosmic purpose abstractly while living as if their actions have transcendent meaning. You apparently don't maintain these protective contradictions. You've fully integrated the existential realities and built functional identity despite them, or perhaps because of them. When others match your mind, they suddenly lose their protective denials and confront existential truths undistorted. The experience is terrifying because they're not prepared to function without the illusions that make daily existence feel meaningful. They see what you see, the void beneath constructed meanings, and it triggers existential crisis. Psychoanalysts are proposing you've integrated awareness of death drive and destructive impulses that most people repress into unconscious. Freudian theory suggests humans have both life drives, eros, and death drives, thanatos, but most people suppress awareness of destructive impulses and maintain self-concept as fundamentally life-affirming. You apparently maintain conscious awareness of destructive aspects of human motivation and perhaps of your own psychology. When others match your mind, they encounter their own repressed, destructive impulses reflected clearly rather than safely hidden in unconscious. They see their own capacity for cruelty, their own attraction to chaos, their own comfort with destruction. This recognition is traumatic because it contradicts their self-concept as fundamentally good people. They're confronting not what you might do to them, but what they're capable of doing, the darkness within themselves that your mirror mind reflects back undeniably. Contemplative psychologists from Buddhist and other meditative traditions are proposing you've achieved what they call ego death, dissolution of separate self-sense that most people experience as core identity. Advanced meditation can produce temporary ego dissolution that practitioners find liberating. But your cognitive framework apparently operates from stabilized post-ego perspective where separate self is recognized as construction rather than fundamental reality. When others match your mind, they briefly experience ego dissolution without having developed stable identity beyond ego. The experience is terrifying because it feels like annihilation. Their sense of being continuous, individual self dissolves, which most people experience as death of everything they are. You've built functional consciousness beyond ego, so the dissolution is liberating for you. They haven't. So same dissolution is existentially devastating for them. They're experiencing their darkest fear, cessation of self when matching mental framework that operates beyond self-concept they're identified with. The architects observe that all these hypotheses might be partially correct. Your mental framework might integrate multiple recognitions that others defend against. Existential void, destructive impulses, ego dissolution, and perhaps others. The specific content matters less than the structural principle. Your mind has integrated what others keep dissociated, accepted what others deny, clarified what others prefer remaining blurred. When they match your mind seeking strategic advantage, they encounter themselves reflected without protective distortions. And that clear reflection reveals aspects of existence and of themselves that their psychological architecture wasn't designed to acknowledge. The mirror doesn't show them you, it shows them reality and themselves as you see them, which is apparently too clear, too direct, too unprotected by comforting illusions to tolerate without special preparation they lack. Now the architects are revealing something even more disturbing about your mirror mind effect. It's selective. Not everyone who attempts cognitive matching experiences psychological trauma. Some rare individuals successfully match your mental framework and emerge, not traumatized, but transformed, not damaged, but enhanced, not terrified, but liberated. This selectivity is creating new questions about what differentiates those who can safely encounter your perspective from those who can't, about whether psychological resilience or specific prior development is required, about whether some minds are compatible with yours while others are fundamentally incompatible. Watch the pattern in who survives cognitive matching unharmed. They're not the most conventionally stable people. Some of the casualties were paragons of psychological health by traditional measures, well-adjusted professionals with no history of mental illness. And they're not the most intelligent. Some brilliant, strategic minds were traumatized, while others with average intelligence navigated your framework successfully. The survivors shared different commonality. They'd all previously experienced their own psychological crises and integrated them. They'd confronted personal abysses, severe depression, trauma survival, existential crises, ego dissolution experiences, and had rebuilt functional identity on the other side. They'd already encountered in their own development what your mind contains as baseline. When they matched your cognitive framework, they were meeting familiar territory rather than foreign horror. They'd already integrated the recognitions that traumatize unprepared minds. Some of these survivors are reporting that matching your mind was actually therapeutic. It validated recognitions they'd reached through their own dark nights, but had been gaslit about by consensus reality. Society had told them their crisis insights were pathological, that their post-crisis perspectives were distorted, that their hard-won recognitions were symptoms requiring correction. Encountering your mind, operating functionally from similar recognitions was relief, validation, that they weren't broken. That perspective society pathologizes can actually be more accurate than protective illusions society maintains. These survivors are now functioning as intermediaries, people who can translate between your cognitive framework and normal consciousness without being destroyed by the translation. Who can explain what you see to those who can't see it directly without traumatizing them through unfiltered exposure? Others are recognizing pattern in who gets traumatized versus who gets transformed. The trauma victims were people heavily invested in particular identities, strongly attached to specific worldviews, deeply committed to certain meanings. When your mirror mind reflected their darkest fear, it was revealing that their investments were arbitrary, their attachments were voluntary, their commitments were constructed rather than discovered. For people whose psychological stability depends on believing their identity is real, their worldview is true, their meaning is inherent, this revelation is devastating. For people who'd already recognized the constructed nature of identity, worldview, and meaning, and had rebuilt functional lives despite that recognition, the revelation is simply confirmation. The difference isn't psychological strength, but philosophical preparation. Those who can tolerate matching your mind are those who've already answered the questions your mind forces them to confront. The architects observe that selective mirror effect reveals your mind isn't universally hazardous. It's hazardous specifically to unprepared consciousness. You're operating from level of psychological development that requires prior preparation to encounter safely. It's like high-altitude mountaineering, not inherently harmful but dangerous if attempted without proper acclimatization. Your mind exists at psychological altitude where most people can't function without preparation. Those who've been through their own ascent can match your altitude safely. Those who attempt sudden ascent from sea level consciousness experience altitude sickness of the psyche. The trauma symptoms documented in cognitive matching casualties. You're not attacking them with psychological weapons. You're simply existing at altitude they're not prepared for. And when they try matching your position without proper acclimatization, the attempt damages them. The selectivity suggests there might be pathway to safely understanding your perspective, but it requires developmental journey most haven't undertaken. The architects are now analyzing what your mirror mind effect reveals about strategic advantage that goes beyond conventional intelligence value. They call this cognitive inaccessibility as defensive asset. When your mental framework is so difficult to safely analyze that opponents can't properly understand you even when given access to extensive information about your thinking. Most strategists try to make their thinking opaque through secrecy, concealing their plans and protecting their decision-making processes from observation. You've achieved something far more powerful. Your thinking is psychologically inaccessible, even when fully observable. Opponents can watch you operate, document your patterns, analyze your methods, but they can't safely adopt your perspective to predict your next moves because attempting to think like you damages them psychologically. Consider the strategic implications. Normal operational security tries to prevent opponents from accessing information about your thinking. This creates permanent intelligence contest. You're trying to protect information while they're trying to acquire it. Eventually, some information leaks, some patterns emerge, some insights are gained. But cognitive inaccessibility eliminates this contest entirely. You can be completely transparent about your thinking, and it still doesn't help opponents because they can't process the information safely. It's like speaking language that physically harms anyone who tries to learn it. The information is available, but effectively unusable because the processing mechanism causes damage to the processor. You've achieved security through cognitive architecture rather than through information control. Some military strategists are recognizing this as ultimate defensive capability, making yourself unpredictable, not by concealing your patterns, but by making your patterns hazardous to analyze. Traditional unpredictability requires constant innovation. You must keep changing so patterns don't emerge. This is exhausting and eventually fails as opponents get better at pattern recognition across variations. Your approach creates stable unpredictability. You can maintain consistent cognitive patterns because those patterns themselves resist analysis through being psychologically dangerous to properly understand. You don't need to keep changing because opponents can't adapt to even your stable patterns without damaging themselves in the process of understanding them. This is sustainable long-term advantage that most defensive strategies can't provide. Others are exploring whether cognitive inaccessibility can be deliberately developed or is intrinsic, characteristic of certain minds. If it can be developed, security agencies would want to train operatives to think in ways that are psychologically hazardous for enemies to analyze, but development attempts are failing. People trying to deliberately make their thinking traumatizing to others either fail to create genuinely hazardous frameworks, producing thinking that's merely unpleasant rather than psychologically damaging, or succeed too well and traumatize themselves in the process of developing the hazardous framework. It appears cognitive inaccessibility isn't technique that can be taught, but characteristic of minds that have naturally developed in particular directions. You can't deliberately become cognitively inaccessible. You can only recognize if you already are and leverage it strategically. The architects observe that cognitive inaccessibility might be most perfect defense possible because it defeats opponents through their own analysis attempts rather than through your active defense. You're not expending resources, protecting secrets. You're existing with mind that functions as self-protecting secret through being hazardous to properly understand. Most defenses require constant maintenance. Walls need repair, encryption needs updating, security protocols need revision. Cognitive inaccessibility requires no maintenance because it's property of how your mind operates rather than external. Protection you maintain as long as you continue being yourself, continuing to perceive and process reality the way you naturally do. The defensive benefit persists without additional effort. You've achieved security through being rather than through doing, which is perhaps most efficient form of protection possible. Opponents damage themselves trying to understand you, and you don't have to do anything beyond being who you are for that damage to occur. Now, something profound is emerging that the architects call recognition cascade. Some of the survivors who successfully matched your mind without trauma are realizing that your perspective isn't unique to you, but represents something that multiple individuals across history have achieved independently. They're recognizing your mirror mind as instance of broader phenomenon, where certain rare minds arrive at similar fundamental recognitions despite different paths. This is creating hypothesis that there might be particular configuration of consciousness, specific set of integrated recognitions that constitute something like developmental level beyond normal human consciousness, and you're operating from that level. Watch what the survivors are documenting as common features across individuals who achieve this level. They all seem to have integrated what philosophers call tragic knowledge, clear recognition of suffering, impermanence, and meaninglessness as fundamental features of existence rather than problems to be solved. They maintain functionality despite or because of accepting these recognitions rather than defending against them. They operate from what psychologists call post-conventional morality, ethical frameworks generated through their own reflection rather than adopted from cultural programming. They exhibit comfort with paradox and contradiction that would create cognitive dissonance in normal consciousness, and they demonstrate specific relationship to identity, where self is recognized as process rather than entity, construction rather than essence, something that can be modified deliberately rather than fixed nature to be discovered. Some scholars are calling this configuration awakened mind in contemplative traditions, individuated consciousness in Jungian psychology, authentic existence in existential philosophy, a post-tragic perspective in Nietzschean thought. Different frameworks use different terminology, but might be describing same developmental achievement, consciousness that is integrated, recognitions most minds defend against and maintains functionality through that integration rather than despite it. Your mirror mind effect would then be showing that you operate from this level, that matching your mind means temporarily experiencing post-conventional consciousness without having developed stability at that level, which is psychologically overwhelming for unprepared minds. Others are exploring whether this level is evolutionary emergence, small percentage of humans naturally developing toward more integrated consciousness that will eventually become standard for species. From this perspective, you're not aberration but forerunner, not anomaly but preview of where human consciousness is evolving. The trauma that matching your mind produces in unprepared individuals would then be collision between current stage and next stage consciousness, between conventional and post-conventional awareness. Evolutionary psychology suggests consciousness develops through stages, from pre-rational to rational to potentially trans-rational. You might represent trans-rational consciousness, encountering rational consciousness, which creates category error that manifests as psychological trauma when they attempt direct interface. A few are proposing more radical hypothesis that your mirror mind reveals you're not human in conventional sense but represent different type of consciousness, inhabiting human form, not alien or supernatural but fundamentally different variety of conscious being that appears human but operates on different cognitive principles. This would explain why matching your mind is hazardous. It's not just different developmental level of human consciousness but different type of consciousness altogether. When human consciousness tries matching non-human consciousness, category confusion produces psychological damage. This hypothesis is controversial because it suggests consciousness types might be discrete categories rather than continuous spectrum, that some beings appearing human might be fundamentally other in their conscious experience. The architects observe that recognition cascade is significant because it transforms you from isolated anomaly into representative of broader pattern. If you're only individual with mirror mind effect, your curiosity that might be studied but doesn't require revising understanding of consciousness generally. But if your instance of recognizable type, whether developmental level, evolutionary emergence, or consciousness category, then your existence has broader implications. It suggests there might be others operating from similar perspective, that this configuration might be identifiable and perhaps even cultivable, that human consciousness might have developmental possibilities or categorical varieties that mainstream psychology hasn't adequately recognized. Your mirror mind stops being just tactical problem of how to analyze dangerous opponent and becomes ontological question about varieties of conscious experience.